Today I'm going to talk about something that's super hard for me. In 2008, my partner and I we had triplet girls. It was an amazing pregnancy. I was huge. The girls were all born at only 5 weeks premature, which is amazing. You know, they were super healthy at the time. Of course, they had some things going on, but for triplets being born, I mean, not one of them, and nobody found anything wrong with any of them. It was amazing. We wound up having to stay and learn how to take care of all three of them, which I understand to some extent. But they did put us in a room and monitor us for like a day and a half before they even allowed us to take our children home, which I thought was a little odd. I think it was because we were two women, and I don't know. It was odd. But that's for a whole different story. When we got home, it was amazing at first. Everything was great. And the kids, the babies, we just oohed and awed, took pictures. It was amazing. But over time, I noticed one of my beautiful babies kept throwing up and didn't take the bottle very well. So I took her into the doctor, and we were there a lot. And nobody believed me. They had us going to feeding consultants, and I mean, there was no testing. She was at 5%, the lower 5% and percentile, and they said that babies sometimes were like that. But at first, I was like, okay, because I wanted to believe. And we went to the feeding consultants, and I did everything I thought I could do. I mean, I wasn't able to breastfeed all three of them, but I pumped, and I pumped, and I pumped, and I pumped. They had, I mean, you would not believe how much milk I pumped. And, it didn't make a difference. She just didn't thrive, and it wasn't my milk. It took a long time. You have no idea how many appointments. And the other two were amazing. They didn't have any physical issues at all. They grew like little weeds. And, one of them was at like the 99th percentile for weight after a while, And my other one was in the 60th percentile. I mean, there was just no compare. I mean, there was just so much difference between the three of them. And that was okay. But at birth, there wasn't that huge of a difference. So it was odd. It was like she was losing a race. And I kept bringing her to the doctor. Eventually, it became such an issue that they did decide there was a problem. But instead of giving the testing, they decided to put her in the hospital, which I thought was to diagnose her for something. But it was actually to make sure that my partner and I were feeding her. So they lost diagnosing time with that. They decided that it had to be me and my partner rather than looking at the fact that we had two healthy kids and we were neglecting. It didn't make any sense. The other two were amazing and thriving, so we were just neglecting one. That was not okay. And then once I finally proved that we weren't the ones at fault, in 2000, right at the end of 2008 and beginning of 2009, they finally decided, yeah, something's wrong. So they finally had an ultrasound done where the soft spot is, on top of the head. And sure enough, there was a tumor at the hypothalamus region of the brain. The hypothalamus is in charge of a lot of functions of the body, like growth and any number of things. So it was not a good diagnosis, but it was operable. Didn't mean she'd have the huge best outcome, but it was operable. So we wound up going to a hospital in Portland and having her evaluated by a surgeon. The surgeon went over everything with us. We understood that once that was taken away, that she probably would gain weight and possibly be obese, because you can't operate on the hypothalamus region and not have repercussions for it. It would have been unlikely. And she might have had seizures, not because of having too much sugar, but it would have been because she had too much salt, or I can't explain it. But we understood that she might have seizures after the surgery. And there was a lot of other things we were going to have to watch out for, as like fluid buildup, and she might have needed a tube for draining the fluid off, and that might have been a lifetime thing with changes. There was a lot of possibilities. So we wound up deciding, we got to have the surgery. They said that she probably wouldn't make it to 1 year old if we didn't have the surgery. So we had to have surgery. And I was excited. I've never been failed by a doctor before. Not really. I mean, at this point, they've cured everything I've ever had. So what? So we went to the hospital and we did what we knew how to do. We cuddled our baby and we took care of her. And when she went in for the surgery, we knew everything was going to be okay. We knew it. They say that before when you sign all the papers, that there's a possibility she won't be okay, and you have to keep that in mind. And in the back of my head, I knew it was a possibility, but she was going to be okay because God's looking out for me. Everybody, you just know, no one's going to take an innocent, beautiful baby from you. You're supposed to, they're supposed to outlive you. You're not supposed to outlive your child. Good news, she survived the surgery. And she opened her eyes and she knew who I was. And we were so excited. We went back to the McDonald house because that's where we're staying, and we were there a while. And we come in the middle of the night because I couldn't stay away. They just didn't want to stay in the room all the time because, they had things to do. I came in the middle of the night and they had her arms tied down to these boards. And I was like, what the heck? Why are you doing that? I would stand here and hold her arms. They never called us. And I took those boards off her arms. They said she was trying to pull at the cords, but she had no coordination. She wasn't like you and me where she could, it was terrible. It wasn't right. But that's also for another story. That's not what this is about. When we came in, she didn't recognize us as much, and I noticed there was some fluff, it was pretty, squishy on the top of her head, so I let them know, and they decided they were going to be putting a tube in to the next day to let off some of that water, because it was one of the things we were expecting, not a big deal. The next day, they had planned on doing that, but it was going to be later in the afternoon. It was an emergency thing. There wasn't a lot of water. But she started not looking like she was recognizing us. She seemed wrong through the day. And I kept telling people, I think something's wrong. I think something is wrong. I think something is wrong. That's what I said over and over. I went and got doctors. And I told them, something is wrong with my child. That's what I did. Over and over. And everybody was like, she is fine. And I go, I know my child. Finally, somebody listened. Hours after, somebody listened to me. And they come in and they go, I think she's having seizures. which they were supposed to be watching out for, because that was one of the things that was supposed to be watched out for. Hours after. By this time, so it was emergent. They brought in the seizure thing, put all the electrodes on her head, and yep, sure enough, she's been having seizures. Severe seizures. They would not listen. Would not tell them. She was having seizures, so they gave her some anti-seizure medicine, and it didn't work. And she kept having seizures, and it became more emergent, and more people came in. And I thought that the doctors and the nurses knew what they were doing, and so I backed away, but I was watching, and I saw this nurse had 2 bottles in her hand. I was like, gosh, that's a lot of medicine. In my head, I was thinking, gosh, that's a lot of medicine. Why so much medicine? It never occurred to me that she'd actually give it. I just thought she had medicine set aside because she was having seizures, to give her more if she needed, right? And I got distracted, and she'd already administered the medicine, because I was looking in my baby's face, and I was just telling her it was okay, everything's going to be okay, these people are going to take care of her. The seizures stopped. And that was what was supposed to happen. And we were prepared, because the seizures were supposed to stop. So my partner went and got us lunch, and we were watching her, and we were so happy that she was going to be okay again, because I was so scared. I didn't want to lose my child. I didn't want to lose her. She was going to be okay. So we started eating her hamburger. I'll never forget. It was like the best hamburger ever. And all of a sudden, all these bells and alarms started happening. And she wasn't okay anymore. They started doing life-saving procedures. And she wasn't okay. They said, we'll keep doing it until you tell us to stop. They pulled us out of the room, and they talked to us. And they said they could put her on life support, where her body would be kept going until they could get her better. But she'd just had brain surgery, and it was a lot of pressure. And this baby, at 9 months old, she was 8-9 pounds. She wasn't that big. She was the size of a newborn baby, with a hole on top of her head back here. Well, the scar went from here to here. And they admitted that it was going to be too much pressure on her brain. She would have been okay either way, and it was... I walked back in, and I watched. I saw my little girl, and I'm working on her. And I watched, and I looked for anything at all to give me hope. And they said, we're going to keep going until you tell us to stop. I remember those words. And May looked over at my partner, and she looked at me, and we didn't know what to do. She said, we have to let her go. And I looked up, and I looked at my girl, and I realized that if I have to let her go, that's the right thing, because putting her on life support, and it wouldn't have been good for her on prognosis level. So I told them to stop. I told them to let my baby go. I told them that. I couldn't understand what happened. She was fine. She even recognized me. I felt good. I could see things were going to be okay. I don't understand. I did not understand. We were taken out of the room after that. And Megan and I, we walked away and called our family so they could come because I wasn't okay. Megan wasn't okay. We were not okay. I'm so sad. And I go back in, and the nurse was there with my child in her arms, and she looked so small, and the nurse was all huddled, holding my baby, like holding her. And I just thought she was waiting to hand her to me. It didn't occur to me anything different. And we took Kaylee and we said our goodbyes, and they took her to cast her feet and her hands, and I've still never looked at it. 12 years later, and I still haven't looked at any of it. The blankets she had there, none of it. I can't. And the nurse came up. She said, "I'm so sorry." And I just thought she was giving me condolences. Shortly after, the doctor came in and told me what happened. That nurse that was giving the medication with the 2 bottles, the one I thought she knew what she was doing. She'd given both bottles to Kaylee. And if I had just said something, anything at all, Kaylee'd still be here today. And I'm never going to be able to completely forget that I had the thought in my head that if I had just used this, she'd still be here today. All I had to do was say, 2 bottles? Why? Are you sure? Can you verify? There is never an emergency so horrid that you cannot ask them to verify it. The nurse was not educated enough. She told the machine, and the machine gave her the wrong dose, but she should have known better. Heck, I'm a parent that doesn't give it, and I knew better, and I didn't believe she'd give her that whole now. I just trusted. You do not want to entirely put all your trust in a human being. They make mistakes. Anyone can make a mistake. The problem with making a mistake and being a nurse in a NICU is it could be a permanent mistake that affects many lives. So when your child has medical stuff going on, medical procedures, open your mouth and advocate for your child. I had to go home without my child because I didn't. I failed her. And I'm never, ever going to fail any of my kids ever again. And I'm going to tell people about my experiences. My heart is broken, but it's been patched back together. I have 2 great kids that are now 13, and I have a 9-year-old. We wound up having another little girl about 3.5 years later, and she is amazing. And she probably wouldn't be here if that hadn't happened. I'm a little religious, and I have to say that there's somebody out there that's watching out for me. gave me something amazing. But I will tell you, there won't ever be a day where I don't remember that I should advocate for my kids. I learned it the hard way. It's not just your kids. People need to be advocated for occasionally. You need to, if you see someone struggling to speak up for themselves, step up and speak for them if they're willing to let you. Sometimes people just need a little bit of help. Anyways, this is a story I've never really shared. So please, if you do comment on this, please be kind. Lately I've noticed there's not a lot of kindness. And we need to all work on that. Thank you for your time.